Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where we chat with startup founders and solopreneurs just like you from all over the globe. During our chat today, picture yourself starting your own startup journey. If our guests can do it, you can too. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. Let Podbrand create and host your company-branded podcast. Learn more at podbrandmedia.com. This is Kevin Pruitt, and this is another episode of Rising Tide Startups. My guest today is Apryl Syed. Apryl, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We had a quick chat before we hit the button, but she's been on a number of other episodes, so there wasn't a lot of prep work that we had to do for this one. So, Apryl, if you and I met at like a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
Well, I would probably say at first is I help companies that are stuck at a certain revenue size, and that's the signal of what I look for. And then how I serve those companies is in a variety of different areas, depending on exactly why that revenue is stuck. So it could be go to market, could be, marketing issues, could be sales issues, could be customer success, could be product flow, could be creating something in their customer journey that has too much friction in it. So I try to work through those things with them, get them unstuck from that revenue, get them gaining revenue in a consistent way. And I often also attract a lot of people that have had a lot of success in business and then have kind of reached a plateau, and they haven't really had marketing before. They haven't really had like consistent marketing. And maybe they've grown through referrals or word of mouth, or they've just had a product that's taken off. And so I come in a lot to those situations as well. And again, they're stuck at a certain revenue size, can't get past it.
So I could think of a million reasons why you may be stuck at a certain revenue, plateau, as I think you described it. So what's that like? Walk us through the process a little bit. I mean, like if I came to you and I said, hey, our revenue is like a stair step, like we'll grow and then we'll flatten out, and then we'll grow and then we'll go flat for a while. And we'd like to create this upward hockey stick, a little more consistently. So what's the first thing you would do?
First thing I do is take a look at everything: processes, systems, people. Sometimes what we might not have access to gets on the list as well. Is like, oh, well, we don't have these things. So that's the first thing. Interviews. I'll go and interview different team members across the organization, really try to understand how things flow together. How does a customer get acquired? How do they go through the journey? What happens to them once they're in the cycle? And then I look for leaks and breaks. And so I usually give some sort of like, okay, this is my audit. Here's what I think we're dealing with here. Here are the things that we need to fix. And I prioritize them in terms of return and speed. So I kind of give them a high, medium, and low in terms of like how difficult they are going to be to implement. Some things are a lot long term versus short term. And so what I try to recommend is getting some quick wins in the door, because that's really important while we work on foundational things to build revenue more sustainable, more long term. Things like putting a whole entire new sales process, that's a longer term, thing. But we might be able to do some things while we're doing that provide quick wins and revenue in the door to the business. So yeah, that's the very first start of the process.
I mean, one thing that I did not hear you mention, but I am absolutely confident. I'll bet my next paycheck that it is in your process is just reviewing like product market fit, or the product itself. I mean, the old adage says, you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. So once you're looking at the product and you're thinking, there's nothing I could do to change this revenue plateau you're on because the product is just really bad.
Well, I mean, maybe. I've had a couple of situations where I just don't think the product's the right. And by the way, I wouldn't take on that type of customer if it was really that bad. But I've also realized that sometimes there's solutions for different types of people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like a premier product in order to make really good revenue. And so kind of keeping an open mind, but then also, I mean, I will get involved with like, hey, maybe we should look at some new feature sets. Maybe there are some things the customers are requesting that we should add in, and that would help churn. If we, certainly added these things. I'm working with a client right now, a software company. One of the very first things that we did is they had friction in their sign up process. And we removed some of those friction points to see if that would be a change. And then also we are working on some of those feature enhancements while we're doing a bunch of other things, modifying Google Ads, looking at the way we're tracking information. We reorganized their team in terms of a pre 120 team and a post 120 team and eliminated sales altogether because they're serving a market that likes a lot of handholding. And so you can see the stretch of the fingers of everything that can be involved in some of those things. And yes, it's producing results, moving the needle in the right direction. And those are the positive things that we want to see. We want to see our tests going into place and giving us indicators that we should still continue to move down those pathways.
I think I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit because what I intended to do a second ago, right after your brief networking intro, is to say, hey, let's broaden this a little bit. I mean, that's you're telling me what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but go a little deeper. Who is Apryl for our audience? So they'll have foundation. Where do you live? Family, history, whatever you want to add to kind of build this up a little bit.
Well, sure. I live in the Bay Area, so I often feel like I'm in a bubble, especially when it comes to AI and everything that's happening from that perspective. And quite frankly, I'm way in deep, right, with all of the various different tools. I come from a technical background, so I feel like I grew up at Sage. Sage is an ERP, CRM. They've had CRM products, I've had HR products, but mostly an ERP, accounting, manufacturing software. I ran 3 of their product lines by the time I entered there. And I also ran North American NPS programs and helped and partnered with partner education, which means I went into the channel, helped a lot of the channel partners architect their businesses, put them on the pathway for growth, and really do a lot of work there, kind of similar to the work I do today, I did in the channel. And that were kind of like my beginning roots of doing some of those things and became my love for doing those things. I wanted to step out of that industry, but first I did a little stop in the channel. I had a partner that tried to hire me 6 times. He let me write my job description. I went in there, ran sales, marketing, customer success, helped them launch, Salesforce practice, a HubSpot practice internally there, or marketing automation. There are a few tools. Launched a magazine while there that they still have in operation today. That was a business forward magazine for manufacturers and distributors growing their business. And then I wanted to learn about AI. So I jumped out to a company called Bloomreach, ran their advisory team there, worked with very large retail companies like Staples, Gap, Neiman Marcus, Williams Sonoma,
Liquid IV.
um, LiquidIV. Well, actually, LiquidIV wasn't one of the stores. That's one of mine. But worked with some of those and figured out that working with those really large companies, I just didn't love. It wasn't as fulfilling for me as it was working with smaller organizations and really seeing the impact. When you're working with large organizations, it's a 2-year change management, and people are shuffling and changing in that time period, and for me, it was not as rewarding. So I kind of did some soul searching and said, well, I kind of want to start my own thing. Thought it was going to be consulting based, thought it was going to be focused on, the coaching side of things. And so I got certified in neurolinguistics programming, really kind of like dove deep, even got certified in hypnosis. Because I thought I was going to work with founders and coach them to kind of be their best selves. But that very quickly led me back into sales marketing. And that's because the biggest problem a lot of the people I was working with that they had was growing revenue. And it's like, can't you just fix this for me? You know how to do this. You're giving me all the tips. Can't you just come in and do it for me? And so that's kind of how I routed back in there. But to your point, customers like LiquidIV and Close and Xero, for my own organizations, those are companies that I've worked with to do conversion strategy and, help them architect better conversion rates
Yeah.
on the advertising that they're doing.
Are there universals, like regardless of the size of the client, are there just universal principles that apply? I don't care if your revenue is 10 million or 500 million.
Mhm. Yes, there are universal principles. And I would say you have to know what your signals are. So, like my signal I told you is like someone stuck at a revenue size. You need to know what that signal is. And you need to know how to explain what you do in a way that is in the least amount of words possible and to an audience that is your target audience. I think most of the companies I step into do not or have not refreshed their personas in a long time. They're in a deck sitting on a shelf somewhere or in a file, folder on a computer, and they have not been opened up. They haven't been viewed. My point of view is a little different. Even a company of my size, you got to look at those personas on a quarterly basis. And that's because for you to understand what's going on in your audience's world, you need to know what world impacts
Hmm.
are happening, how the news is impacting them, how the world news is impacting their point of view, what their triggers might be, what they might be sensitive to, and if there's any new personas that are being developed. And I think that's a universal thing that if I could just tell everyone out there, understand your personas really deep at that level, that means you can then write better for them, better copy, better website copy, better LinkedIn post copy, whatever it is that you're using to reach your audience. You're going to have better understanding if you speak from their point of view and their pain points first. And that is universal, regardless of size, regardless of anything.
It is, I mean, the what you're talking about, in practice just seems like, it's almost like you're repeating my words back to me in the sales process, or you're saying what I'm thinking in my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
so it almost sounds like my thoughts instead of you trying to sell me something, all you're doing is you're reinforcing what I'm already thinking. So that's an easier pathway to a yes for sure, is if you're
It
if you're
definitely
speaking my
is.
language.
And I work with, right now, I just started working with a really, really interesting, super smart client. And they work from the angle of visuals. And again, another company that's grown and has not had marketing involved in their business. They've just grown based on referrals and the work that they've done from a PR perspective. And I'm learning
Hmm.
even now about matching the visuals to those really good words that I've focused so much of my career on, that even giving someone a visual cue to match it with the language and repeating that visual over and over again can help tie your brand to certain thoughts that are kind of like more um, exactly what you said, which is what triggered me saying that. It's kind of
Hmm.
like it's already in your mind. You're already associating it with something positive, and visuals can do that. And I haven't always thought about those visuals. And
Hmm.
it's something now that I am paying more and more closer attention to.
I mean, I think of companies really early in the process, like Nike and Apple come to mind, where I think they recognize that really, really early. And
That
it
apple is
just,
iconic.
the ad was just
It's
different,
iconic.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, their Think Different campaign, you look back at that one and you think, that had nothing to do with computers, and everything, it had everything to do with computers at the same time.
It had
So
everything to do with the message of what they were trying to associate
exactly.
themselves with. And they wanted to have community and people who were also gravitating towards that same thought process. And they had probably narrowed it down. I'm guessing that that was their customer. Their customer was somebody who already was thinking differently. And so they dove into that both with the words and then, with a visual representation of that, kind of like Apple. I think of education, I think of growth, at that time. I think of, really thinking, you think of a teacher, all of those associations that were already happening with an Apple that now are associated with that brand because that's the imagery that they put with it. And those are things that I didn't necessarily pay attention to before. I paid attention in conversion strategy an awful lot because certain images convert better. And there's certain techniques that we would use to get landing page conversion up. And for each market, we would test those visuals because they would be different for each market, even color schemes and things like that. So from that perspective, I guess I dipped my toe more into it than now I'm really headfirst diving in.
I yeah, I love the what you were talking about earlier. I mean, when you said, "How do you describe yourself?" I help companies that are stuck at a certain, like a static revenue or a revenue plateau, I think is how you described it. But I'm thinking about, those are companies have already, that have a history. They've been in existence for a while. They've seen some ups and downs. They've gone through, maybe as Seth Godin calls, the dip, make
Yeah.
it through. But I think about a startup. It's almost like, if you come in and there's a company that's kind of flatlined here, at a certain level, it's almost like you have to have a startup mentality to get it
Yeah.
restarted again. So but are there differences though? Are there differences you're looking at that say, hey, we have more credible data, we have more experience in this line. We know our customer better than a startup would. What are some other maybe differences that's not an exact,
Yeah. Well, I
one for
think
one
when
here?
I think of startups, and I have also worked with a bunch of startups, I mean, I'm in startup land, so it's almost impossible. I can throw a rock and hit one. There's one downstairs. For me, as my husband's got a startup, but when working with startups, what I try to focus in on is industry standards. We should be hitting these certain benchmarks and industry standards. If not, we need to do more testing. And then I utilize LinkedIn an awful lot if the target demographic is there for that startup. And the reason being why is because I can test messages very quickly, see if I am getting a response to them, and it is free to do that. It is relatively free to do that, both from a call to action perspective, also from just messaging your product to see if there's interest. And there's a lot of wrong ways that people do that on LinkedIn. And I'm sure that's what everyone's thinking right now. It's like, oh, I've been spammed on LinkedIn and people are just like sending me their product information. For me, I really promote a very conversational, like get to know your customer, kind of strategy. And in doing so, through those conversations, you can really hear and pick up on the triggers. For instance, one startup that I was working with, they're headed down one pathway, kind of promoting one area of their product super heavily. And through customer conversations, we kind of figured out, oh, this other area is kind of like what everybody wants. And here we've been going way deep messaging this other thing, but we have this other part over here that's really great and people are really excited about. We better switch and start talking about this other thing because that's the sticky stuff. And so I listen to sales calls. I listen to conversations with customers. I jump in and get in conversations with customers if they want me to go that deep and I'm involved that much, because I like to hear what people are saying, what they're asking for, what they want. That just makes it so that I can do that messaging better. I'm hearing straight from the persona themselves. And I think that's really the trick with startups is test, don't go all in, have a few different messages that you're testing, work on your visual representation to try and bring something all together, help kind of signal to your audience. Back to those personas, really deep dive on your personas. Who are you doing this for? And then test and verify as much as you can before you go deep into running a Google ad and spending money. Like, let's make sure that one, you have the right audience picked out and that audience is interested in what you have and they are willing to pay for what you have, because I see a lot of products that are built and they're beautiful. But that audience it's not in their top 10. It's not in their top 10 problems, right? So they're not getting the sales because it's just not something they're going to spend money on maybe this year or next year. Or they have another product in place that does similar things and maybe they would like to switch, but they're in a 2 or 3 year contract. You're pretty much like toast. at that point. You're playing the waiting game and then you need to stay in front. Um, so those are, I mean, some of the things that I would do with startups.
I love the your approach in LinkedIn, kind of the conversational learning, approach. But I see two different types often in LinkedIn. Like one is exactly how you described it, where it is an authentic conversation, and I don't feel like you're trying to sell me. I think you're trying to learn more about what I do, what I need, those types of things. The other is like, oh, Kevin, this is so and so. I'm reaching out because I see that, obviously you have a need of this because of this. And I'm like, you're making some wild assumptions. And often
Assumptions.
you're not even right. I mean, because
Yeah.
you don't even know the industry I'm in. You don't know who I am. You have no idea how many employees we have. I mean, it is just a spaghetti on the wall, approach type thing. So I applaud the way that you're approaching this because I think it is much less spammy. And I mean, it makes perfect sense that you're wanting to know more about, our your potential client, your ideal client. So, bravo on that one.
Well, thank you. And yes, it's, every once in a while I get the founder who's like, no, we got to tell them about our great stuff. It's like, no, we
They'll
don't meet
identify it.
people and then just like spew. It's not how
Yeah.
you would do it in person. So you definitely shouldn't be doing it socially.
Who is your
Yeah.
ideal client? If you had to, who's your avatar?
I have three, mostly I'm working with founders.
Mhm.
So I'm dealing directly with a founder.
Industry
I
agnostic.
Three industries: SaaS and software companies, service-based professional services firms,
Hmm.
and then manufacturing would be
Okay.
my third. And just because I have such a big background in manufacturing and I understand those businesses. And then I would say like there is this variation, and that is a little bit of a specialty that I think I've started to develop just naturally. And it's kind of coming out again from the audience here is that baby boomers
Hmm.
who have got a business that's maybe been very successful, they might not be at that revenue plateau where they're at that point where they don't have someone else to turn the company over to. And what they need is automation, AI, processes, procedures to either sell or to have maybe employee ownership take over. But they kind of need to get it more stabilized and pulled away from them being the main source of that. And that's a perfect business for me to get involved in because I set up a lot of that structure, and with AI now setting up a lot of that automation where they could either maybe not be involved as much in the day to day, or like partially retire if that's an option, or perhaps they want to sell or they want their employees to buy,
Hmm.
which is another option. So I've been involved in kind of like those scenarios, and I think it's just such a wonderful way to like honor someone who's built something.
Are you prospecting on LinkedIn, or have you just been in a multitude of different locales and opportunities that you have a vast network and they're just reaching out to you? They know this is what you're doing, so they're just reaching out to you and say, "Hey, we need some help in this area," and you're just kind of going from client to client or from friend to friend, working.
No, I absolutely, since day one, have been prospecting on LinkedIn. And I do what I teach and what I implement in other organizations. So, I built my network. I, often talk about the themes that are important
Hmm.
to my audience. I've connected with that audience, so they're seeing those messages and interacting with those messages. And then when it's the right time, then yes, I get hand raisers through LinkedIn or through, some sort of conversation,
Hmm.
end up on the phone with somebody and we figure out, does it make sense for us to keep talking?
Hmm.
Is there a need here or not? I certainly, like everyone else, do get referrals
Yeah.
in, and always appreciate those. And yeah, I mean, that's the way I built my business.
I would be very surprised if you said you don't get referrals. It sounds like somebody tried to hire you six times. I think you obviously are making a good impression on somebody. So and then not just from a boy, she's nice to work with, but she does good work. on
It's
top of that.
interesting. I was recently up for, a contract with a client, and they were reviewing three different people. They'd kind of given us a set, okay, come in and present us the same stuff, like your process, your procedure. And then they narrowed it down to two and told me, like, hey, this other person is going to be with us full time, and you're kind of like fractional. And, I didn't say this, but what I thought is about that gentleman that tried to hire me six times. And he always says, you want something done, give it to a busy person. And I was like, there's a reason why that person is going to be all yours. And, it is basically, and I did win the contract, not mentioning that part, but there is something to like having so much activity and across different businesses, there's so much that I can learn and actually pick and utilize what's working right now in market across the different companies to be able to move faster with each one of them and get results with each one of them. And I don't think I've ever been, when I had a full-time job, I ended up running three product lines, at Sage, and doing NPS across North America and doing partner education. I don't know how to hold one job. So that's kind of like, yes, I get results. Yes, I'm kind of like in everything all at once. And gosh, this world of, AI that we live in is just making it so that I can do more than I've ever been able to do
Yeah.
before.
Well, if you can keep up with it, that
Yes.
that's a magician's effort right there. But I asked you really early in the podcast, that what's step one, when you start and you engage a company, and what's the step one in your process. I want to know one thing that you would tell our audience. Let's say they're in the startup space. What is one thing they can do to increase success, to increase the likelihood of success?
I think back to those personas, I think it's really, really key. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're going to do anything, if you're going to have any AI write content for you, or you are going to work with any of those types of tools, you better have your personas right,
Yeah. Yeah.
or it's
Otherwise, you
going to
look
get it
really
all
silly
wrong.
quickly. That's right.
And it's not going to tailor it to you, and you're going to have what everybody else has. So I would say that is really key and will increase success over what everyone else is doing. The other thing is knowing what industry standards are for the types of things that you are doing so that you have a vision in mind for what you're shooting for. And if you're not getting that, that doesn't mean you stop doing that activity. That means you have to tweak what you're doing, and you kind of have to know some places to go before you start. It's not once you're in it that you figure out those places. It's kind of like, okay, well, if we don't get these results, we will try X and Y and Z next. So being a little bit more mindful about your plan. I see so many like folks like, oh, well, we tried Google Ads, that didn't work for us. Okay. What was the persona? What was the message? What was the landing page content? Where did the problem happen in the process? What were the keywords that you were going after? Were those conversion keywords? There's like five or six things that can go wrong in just Google Ads alone. So understanding what all of those mechanics are before you get started, just educate yourself. And now you've got AI. Ask AI to educate you on all of the things that could go wrong with that scenario and the places you should go and what you should tweak should certain things happen. That way you know what you're in for, right? And we have these tools now that can help educate us and tell us these things. You don't need an expert like me to tell you those things. You can kind of figure that out with the AI yourself. And maybe you want strategies from an expert to be able to do it faster, but you can figure out these things. The other thing right now is I would get really, really good at, I say prompting, but here's what I have figured out about myself and that I've been teaching my clients. It is not about better prompting. It is about connecting the dots of what it might be able to do and connect for you and asking it if it can.
Mm, that is a different approach. That is certainly a different approach because you hear all the time, it's a kind of the old garbage in, garbage out that we talked
And
about
not only
30,
that,
40
I
years
see
ago.
people writing these really long prompts, and I'm like, I don't think that that is actually helping the AI do the job better for you.
Yeah.
You're putting more guide rails on it, certainly. And I'm all for giving it more information, but I like to iterate more with it.
Hmm.
And I think the more you iterate with it in a stream, whichever, I have my choice of tools, but whichever one you're using, the more you iterate, the better it will get. I would never take anything the first thing it gives you. I
Right.
mean, unless you're qualified and you know that it's good. But I play around with things like when I'm working on messaging, I might say, okay, now give me versions that Rory Sutherland would think about. Okay, now give me versions that Jeff Walker would like, like wrote the book on launch. Okay, now give me versions in this angle,
Hmm.
and just keep like looking at it through different lenses. It's why my company is Aperture Codex. It's like looking through things at different lenses to eventually get to like, okay, that feels like home. That's the right messaging. That's what's really going to sit.
So which channel do you use? Do you prefer? Are you a Claude person? You a Gemini? You use ChatGPT? Use all the above?
Well, I have used all of them. My favorite is Claude by
Hmm.
far, by far. And I guess I tell people the difference is like I feel like GPT is like a jock from high school that thinks it knows everything, and Claude knows an awful lot, but he's like a little bit more preserved about it. And he's like, well, let me ask you some questions just to verify that we're on the same page. Let's talk a little bit about it first and before I even recommend you anything because I want to make sure. So it's definitely just more consultative, and maybe
Hmm.
that's what I gravitate towards because that's my style, and I work better with a tool that's not presuming it knows everything and thinks that it's right.
So one's talking at you and the other's talking with you. You
Yes.
just
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody
Essentially.
describe it that way, but when you said that, I'll never get the ChatGPT high school jock out of my mind. You planted that seed, and that will continue forever be there, burned in an
See
image
how
burned
the
in my mind.
visuals now I've created
It
this
is.
visual
You
linking
must
for
have
that
spoken my
brand.
language somehow. So I wasn't thinking that before, but now I am. So oh, I love it. Well, April, thank you so much for just taking time today. It's been a real pleasure, joy to meet you over the airwaves here. But is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you would just like to leave with our listeners, and maybe also tell them where's the best place to learn more about you online?
Well, I tell you, they go to, if they've seen your podcast and they mention your podcast and they come in through our website at aperturecodex.com, I'm happy to do an analysis of their brand from the outside looking in and give them just kind of like a free, quick analysis from what we see online to some tips of things that we would improve. So happy to do that for your audience
Thank you.
just as a first measure. And, maybe that helps somebody along their journey. Or if they want to, send me uh, some messaging that they're using or something like that, we can review that messaging and
Hmm.
kind of like send them some tips of how we would improve it depending on what it's for. So they can certainly reach out to me there. But they can book time with me to do that on my website or through LinkedIn. They can connect with me, message with me there. I will say my LinkedIn is overwhelming sometimes, so it's hard for me to get in there and get to every single message because I do often get hit with like sometime one weekend I had like 1,000 connections at one time.
Wow.
Um, I know I'm not complaining. I'm very thankful for that. And I just want to tell people like sometimes it might be hard for me to find their message
Hmm.
in there because there
Yep.
is a lot that
Yep.
I probably don't necessarily need to pay attention to. Um, and so that might be a messier. So I definitely say like the website is going to be the best out of all of those.
Well, April, I appreciate that. Your podcast host may be the first one in line to sign up for some time here for sure because
Please
I
do.
this brand suffers on this end often, and but yeah, I need to talk to somebody that knows how to Help me
Isn't it the
identify my
cobbler's
persona.
shoes, though? It's the cobbler's kids that don't have shoes. I think,
Exactly.
those that can't do, teach, I don't know. It's something like that, but it's,
Those who can't
you
teach
know,
consult. That's right.
consult exactly. I've been that book. So I think we all need an outside perspective looking in, and it's helpful to get that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, April, thank you again. It has been a pleasure. We just hope you have a great week. Thanks again for taking time and just sharing with our audience and sharing from your areas of expertise and experience and just really helping all boats rise in a rising tide. April, thanks again. Have a great evening.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Bye bye.
And now here's a quick word from one of our new sponsors on Rising Tide Startups. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. So you started your own company or branded podcast and now it's fading. Let Podbrand give it new life. Check out podbrandmedia.com to learn more. We hope you heard some great takeaways and are now ready to take action yourself. As always, thank you for listening and helping all boats rise in a rising tide.